listeners, and welcome to the Sailing and Cruising the East Coast of the United States podcast. I'm Balaam Eustis.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
Hey, this is our podcast about sailing the East Coast of the United States. In some episodes, we'll focus on passages and destinations. And in other episodes, we'll talk about boats, equipment, and techniques. And when we come across an interesting individual, we'll try to get them to be a guest on the show. You know, before we dive into this episode, Mike, I want to say a special thank you to our supporters. Several listeners have made a monthly financial contribution to support the podcast to help defray the cost of producing these episodes. And we now have a Patreon page, so you can support the podcast as well. Just go to patreon.com/sailingtheeast. And thanks again to all of our supporters.
Agreed. Now,
so Mike, as you can see in the background, I'm on the boat.
Exactly, Bela. It's always nice to see you on the boat. It's always nice to feel like I'm, there in the on the boat with you, even though I'm 1,000 miles away in Germany. But it looks a little chilly there. What's the weather? Let's start there.
Yeah, it is chilly. This is the first week in May. Today's date, as we record this, is May 4th. The boat was splashed, as they say in the industry, on May the 2nd. So we put in the water, and I came out yesterday. And it's yesterday I got here about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was sort of drizzly and cool. And today it's the same, a little drizzly, a little cool. It's 44 degrees here, Mike, with a north wind, and that is chilly.
Sorry, it's let me see, converting to Fahrenheit, it's about 70 degrees and sunny here in Münster. So I'll send some sunshine and some warm breezes your way, but great. So what was the boats in the water you got on? Any surprises?
No. I will say I have a little portable heater with me that I bring at this time of year,
Nice.
and my sleeping bag. So I had a nice, cozy, comfortable night last night. It was quite nice. So what I have to do when it gets put in the water is the first thing I work on is the water system. Everything needs to be winterized, of course. So in the fall, I pump, antifreeze, a particular type of antifreeze that you can use in water, typically used on RVs to winterize RVs. It's the same stuff. And I pump that through the whole water system. So I have it in the water tanks and all the lines, because it does freeze here and I don't want anything to freeze. So that's the first big task of getting all of that out of the system, which requires pumping it out as best I can. And then I have 3 water tanks on this boat. So this boat holds about 160 gallons of water in 3 separate tanks. So, I with a garden hose, I put 3 or 4 gallons into each tank. I pump those out, and then I repeat that 2 or 3 times to kind of try to rinse everything out of there I can. And then I have to turn on all the faucets and, make sure all of the antifreeze is out of there. This antifreeze is human and animal friendly. It's not the kind you put in your car that'll kill you. This is an RV antifreeze that's made with a different glycol something or other. But still, it has this little bit of a weird taste, and we get it out of the water. We don't drink the water from the holding tanks on the boat, but we do shower with it, and we drink bottled water that we bring, or run over to my son's house and fill up jugs of water, or I can fill them up here at the marina. So we don't drink the water that's in the holding tanks. But either way, so that's the first big job. I got that done. So that's all good. And next, I got to sort of do a big spring cleaning on the boat, because, it sat for 5 months and things are dusty and grimy. It sits in a dirty boatyard. I do have it covered, but it's amazing. Stuff still gets a little dirty. So I got to do some vacuuming and some wiping down of the surfaces. So that's what's on store for today.
Okay. And you have any help, or you flying solo on this all the way? Your son going to come help?
Yeah.
Or your wife? You said your wife didn't come. You came on alone, yeah?
Yeah, I'm solo. I usually do this solo. Andy's working. So I did have dinner with them last night. He worked the night before. He worked overnight, so meaning he goes into work like at 9 o'clock at night and comes home at 7 in the morning. So he was not real functional yesterday, but he's back to work today and tomorrow. So I'll be doing it solo. But this is that kind of work. It's fine to do it solo.
Okay.
Another person doesn't make it go twice as fast. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Cool.
So,
and is the weather supposed to turn a little better, or is this what you got for the next few days?
No, the weather's supposed to get better. It's supposed to get nicer this afternoon and then start warming up. I'll probably be here till Saturday or Sunday. A couple of other things I have to do. I need to start up the engine, because that's also winterized. So I got to pump the antifreeze out of that, make sure that's all running well. Do the same with the generator. And that's about it. And then I might even, if it's nice Saturday or Sunday, I might take her out for a little solo sail.
Nice. That'd be awesome. Good.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah.
All right. So let's focus on today's guest. So we have a familiar face to our regular listeners. And Bela, if my memory is correct, Mike Malekoff was a guest back in episode, I think, 66. And then a two-parter, 72 and 73. And we followed his adventures leaving Lake Champlain, 77 and 78. And he started right up, not too far from where you're sitting, right, in Lake Champlain. And his goal was making it all the way to the Bahamas. And in each of these episodes along the way, we've kind of plotted through his planning process and the departure and halfway and crossing once you get to Florida. And now he's there. This is really, to me, I think this is a really cool kind of recurring theme in the podcast. And it's really neat to kind of hear the whole story, better and worse, of his trip.
Yeah, I think it's a nice little sort of theme that you can follow along, and I feel like I'm part of his trip, even though I'm not. So this one was also a longer conversation, so broke it into two parts. So this episode number 81 and the next episode 82 will be both with Mike. So let's dive right in. What do you say?
Let's do it.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
Bela, nice seeing you again. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well. So I think the last time we chatted, you had recently arrived in the Bahamas from your epic journey, starting up in Lake Champlain, which is up in Vermont, New York border, down the Hudson River, down the east coast of the United States, down to Florida, head due east to the Bahamas. And that was the last time we chatted. So how long have you been in the Bahamas now?
I want to say we've been 4 to 5 weeks, give or take. So, but I'd like to name this episode, which is called Fixing Your Boat in Exotic Places.
Well, I think that's a title that many have come to realize. Yeah, but
yes,
hey, listen,
and I've painfully.
It's better than fixing your boat in Barrington, Rhode Island.
I guess that's true, but it does come with its own unique features of doing it in the Bahamas. So I will say it is still 75, 80 degrees. So you're not working on your boat with gloves and ski hat.
Yeah. So you've been there 4 weeks or so, and I want to talk about the boat a little further on in the podcast here. But tell me what things have been better than you expected.
What things have been better?
Yeah.
I would say just the experience has been definitely it's a journey, I'll call it. It's not a vacation. And I think I've mentioned this and I probably mentioned it too many times, but I think meeting the people that you meet along the way has been probably, one of the highlights. I should say, could say the highlight, but we've made so many new friends. And the other character that I think goes through what I'll call the cruising community is everybody is willing to help you, because everybody sooner or later is going to need help. So it's been really nice in that respect, that if you do have questions or issues or even parts, people will immediately say, "Hey, I've got one of those, and I can give you a spare." So in that respect, it's just been really nice meeting people. And I think part of it is that you're brought together in a camaraderie, all doing the same thing. So immediately you have a common topic to talk about, which is, where did you come from? What was it like? How were the seas? What was the weather like? Were you able to get a slip? How was the moor? And I can go on through the 50 questions that people bring up, and bingo, you've got something to chat about. But I guess going back to what I was saying is, when we did speak last, we were crossing over the Gulf Stream. We crossed over into Bimini, the first island, which is about 45, 50 miles from the coast of Florida. And then from Bimini, in a day or two, we had such good weather, we then crossed over another 60 or 70 miles into the Berry Islands. And we were in the northern part of the Berry Islands. It's a fairly remote set of islands in the Bahamas. And when I spoke with you, we were in Great Harbor Key Marina. And at the time, I was trying to talk to you, and I had to limit it because I was using my phone and I was connected to some other boat's Wi-Fi. Because one of the things I think I mentioned to you that we did have a lot of problems with is Starlink. And I've talked about the enormous benefits of Starlink, but the downside is Starlink does not have customer service. It's almost non-existent. And, fortunately, my wife, who is a tech person, it took her a good week to 10 days, almost 2 weeks, to sort through it and to be able to get to somebody that could help us with what turned out to be a minuscule problem. Mm-hmm. That it didn't have anything to do with the equipment or anything like that. It was simply we were correcting a name in our address thing, and it just shut the system down. Anyway, it's been fixed, and it's working. I'm using it right now, but we've run into other people with the same problem. All of a sudden, the system stops, and you have, what do you do? And you basically go on their system, you put a ticket in, and you get a robo response, and then you wait and wait and wait. Anyway, so we were in the Berries when I spoke with you that time in the northern part, and since then we left there. We went south into the Berry Islands, and we were at a place called Chub Key for about 2 weeks or so. And then from there, we crossed over part of, the middle part, what they call the tongue of the Bahamas. And we right now are in the Eleutheras, and we're in a place called Spanish Wells, which is the northern part of the Eleuthera Islands. And so we've been here about a week or so. And some of the experiences have been just fantastic. I think I mentioned to you the water, the color of the water. The Bahamas sit on a shelf. So the water throughout the Bahamas, for the most part, is 10 to 12, 15 feet deep for miles. So it basically, as they say, creates a washing effect that when the tide goes out and then comes back in, all the water leaves, so to speak, and new water is flushed back in. So you just literally have absolutely crystal clear water in the Bahamas, which makes it great for, swimming, because it's always 75, 80 degrees and the water's warm. But snorkeling, fishing, all of that is second to none because of the sea life, and you feel like you're in an aquarium when you're swimming. So
super. Sounds wonderful. Sounds very, very nice.
it is, and but I then go back to what I originally started. I've been thinking about this and talking to you about how we had set this goal or destination thing 3 years ago, that we wanted to spend the winter in the Bahamas, and we're spending the winter in the Bahamas. And as much as I love other people to do what we're doing, I now recognize the amount of work is just enormous. And one of the things you had asked me when we just got here, you said, what is it that you didn't bring or that you needed that you didn't? And at that time, I didn't have anything. I have a laundry list now.
Oh, very good.
And I'll tell you why I shouldn't say a laundry list, but I do have a list. One of the things that I have learned, and they didn't teach me this in sailing class when I was learning about winches and sail trim and all of that, is that when we crossed over into the Bahamas, we don't. I don't want to get off on another tangent. We as Americans have no idea how good we have it in the United States. Everything you need is there at your fingertips. And traveling down from Vermont, we came down on the intercoastal. We were outside, but we were always able to go back inside, go to a marina, and let's see, I need a little part, whatever it might be. I need a clamp. I need a U-bolt. Oh, okay, I'll run over to Home Depot. I go over to Home Depot, I get it, bring it back, fix it, put it in, and I'm done. Or with Amazon, you can ship things and have it the next day. As a matter of fact, I forgot to mention this to you. I think when we're still in the States, my wife figured this out. Amazon now has lockers available.
Yes.
And so a lot of times you have stuff shipped to marinas, which can be problematic, getting mixed up or lost or whatever. But they won't be, you can't ship to a marina. Well, they have lockers everywhere, and they're outside in a lot of cases. They're in stores, and you ship it to a locker. My wife goes up with her smartphone. You put it next to the locker. It pops open, and bingo, and you have it. So, being in the U.S., you get so used to being able to get anything at any time at a good price. As soon as we crossed over, you've left the United States and you're in a new world. And I've told you the clear waters, the beautiful weather is just second to none. But the services are non-existent. And it's a real eye-opening experience that literally, we need a part right now. We need something, and we have to figure out how do we get it here.
Yeah.
There are no Home Depots. There's, no hardware stores. There's virtually nothing. And that includes people to work on your boat.
Yeah.
So you learn very quickly that you do it or you have somebody help you, because there just isn't anybody.
Yes.
And that was eye-opening to us, as we have struggled with some things and we have watched others struggle with the same thing.
As you were saying that, it reminded me of one of the YouTube sailing channels I watch on occasion. They're down there in the Caribbean and the Bahamas. And I noticed that like every week or every other week, they would have someone come visit them from the States. And, this person would come for a week and then they would leave. And then a few days later, someone else would come. And every time a new person came to visit, they always brought stuff with them that they needed. So that was
Don't-
their delivery service, right?
Don't let that secret out. That's why people have people visit them.
Yes,
They have them
exactly.
bring stuff.
Exactly. It's all about delivery. It's like, no, they don't want to sail with you. They need these parts, and they need you to stop and pick this up at West Marine or wherever, and then bring it over. Exactly.
That's exactly it. As a matter of fact, the boat next to us is going back to Nassau to pick up people, and one of the things is they're bringing stuff
Yes.
with them. So yeah, that's one way to do it. Is invite people, because then they can do your shopping
Yes.
and bring it with them.
Exactly.
Yeah, because it's as close as we are to the United States, it's so remote here. And and the people are very nice here. They will try to help you, where they can. But it is interesting, when you ask and say, do you know of somebody that does XYZ? And it's
Yeah.
like, no. It's not like talk to Joe or, well, as a matter of fact, a couple that we have met who's having big engine problems on their Yanmar diesel. They're here. They got towed in to Spanish Wells. The guy that is the diesel mechanic here runs the power station that provides the power to the island. And if you want his help, you have to provide the tools. And he may come over today or tomorrow.
Right.
Right. It's that type of situation. But so anyway, it is interesting, and it's the same with what stores are available. Are they open? Or even as simple as in the Berry Islands, the grocery stores just is eye-opening that they get a shipment once a week from a boat that brings the supplies over to the island, and generally you go the next day to see what they may have that you're interested in buying. Meats are incredibly difficult to get. Fortunately, we really stocked up on meats for that reason. But even simple things like milk, orange juice, they may have it, they may not. They had in the Berry Islands, they had what I would call the very, very basics. A lot of canned goods, because it doesn't go bad.
Sure. Right.
That you can get. But it is eye-opening in terms of the difference between our society and theirs. And in the Berry Islands, these people struggle to make ends meet. There's no industry whatsoever. It's tourism. And they really suffered during pandemic.
Sure.
Because obviously you couldn't travel then. But it's been interesting in terms of us being able to take a couple of day trips where we want. And as I said, the snorkeling, diving is just phenomenal.
Yeah.
We've been on a couple of reefs, and there was one place where the stingrays come right up to you and check you out. That my wife really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it really brings a whole nother aspect into planning a trip like this, or even planning a trip to even more remote places. I mean, people think about the weather, they talk about the route, they think about how deep the water is, all those types of things, but that's just part of it. And it reminded me of my son and his wife hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, which is a trail on the west coast of the United States, not the west coast, but the western part of the United States, that starts at the Mexican border,
right,
and ends at the Canadian border, and it basically goes up through the desert and up to the Rocky Mountains and the Cascades. And we were their shipping department, so they had all of their food planned out for the whole trip, and they would they would text us or say, okay, mail this package on this date to this post office or to this, place that would accept packages, their Amazon locker in essence.
Right.
Because it not only was planning your route, but all the food, the clothes they needed, and they needed different clothes. When they're in the mountains, they needed warm clothing. When they were in the desert, they needed different clothing. So it really, I think it's one of those things that people don't talk about a lot when they're sailing, that this notion of you really have to be self-sufficient and you have to be prepared, not just from the point of view of not of planning your route and having all the weather services and route planning things and maybe some spares for your boat, but there's all sorts of stuff that you really have to think about.
Yeah, and I would say that's probably the thing that is eye-opening to us now, is coming to recognize that. So when you said before, what didn't you bring?
Yeah.
And I said, oh, I think we were covered. One of the things, as basic as it seems, is you need to look at the stuff that can wear out or break on your boat, and you better buy 2 or 3 of those items that you have on your boat. And then the other thing is, hopefully somebody else will have maybe those things that you might not have considered, because you're faced with, again, like you were joking, getting it over here, and it's not easy. It takes a week to 10 days to 2 weeks at a huge price because it has to be flown here.
Right.
So it's got to be, and there are services that do it. And my wife is just looking at something that we need, and it's going to be $150,
right?
To get it here. And then where do you send it? Because how long is it going to take? So I would say there are a lot of items now that I recognize that heavy wear and tear, that you need to have a backup just in case.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the one that fortunately we've figured out, but nobody talked about this when we were learning how to sail, preparing for the course. And you'll appreciate this, having a very similar boat, is a macerator. And most people go, what's a macerator? Let me tell you, you better have one, and it better work, and you better have a backup.
Oh yeah.
Because
last time you had mentioned that it wasn't, last time we chatted, I think you mentioned that it was on your list to diagnose because it wasn't working properly.
Correct. It wasn't working properly. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but here is another thing that, coming from the US, you take for granted. And you and I have talked about this, and we laugh that when your tank, your black water tank, if people don't know, is where the waste go when you use the bathrooms and stuff. It stays on the boat. You know, that's the way it is. And we joked about, don't let it get more than half full before pumping out, because you never know when the pump out might not be working.
Right, that's right.
But one thing you can be sure of in the US, you'll find a pump out. Everybody has a pump out for the most part. And in Lake Champlain, you had to pump out, and it was free because they didn't want you dumping overboard. We left the United States. We haven't found a pump out yet.
Yeah.
There aren't any. So you then have to dump or take care of your waste. And a lot of people will cringe over this, but with the United States, you're supposed to be 3 to 5 miles offshore before you dump your waste. There are no rules here in the Bahamas, and there is no place to pump out. So that means your system better work, because if it doesn't, you're up, what creek, no pun intended. So when we left, we never used our macerator. We were in Vermont. You were not allowed. You couldn't do it. And when we came down and we're stopping, like you and I talked about, hey, we get near half full, I'm in a marina, pump it out, we're all set. So we never thought about it. And we finally tested it off the coast of Florida when we were still coming down and we were offshore. We tested it. It worked. Okay, we're fine. And that was it. Well, when we crossed from Bimini over to the Berry Islands, it clogged. For whatever reason, it just ran and stopped, and it wasn't emptying out the black water tank. And it's like, what do you do? Well, obviously, it's probably one of the worst things anybody could have to work on.
Yeah.
Is the black water tank and stuff. Thank goodness we got a recommendation of, before you start taking things apart, that go under the boat, open the seacock to the black water tank, and seal a hose in there and basically give your system an enema, as they called it. And boy, I'll tell you, knock on wood, the water shot back up, went through the whole system, went through the macerator, which is the pump that chops everything and sends it out, and it went back in the tank, and you could hear it in the tank. So it cleared the lines, and as I said, knock on wood, it worked. And we've given that recommendation to 2 or 3 other people that had similar problems.
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, and it's like, before you start taking things apart, go in through the seacock. Now, in our situation, which is the funny part of the story, that requires you going in the water. So we were in Great Harbor in the Berry Islands in the marina, which is a big fishing marina. So you had people, the locals that fish, coming in and out. They had their catch. They clean a lot of their catch. They throw it into the water. And what does that attract?
Things that most humans don't like all that much.
Yes, and namely very big bull sharks that are 10 to 12 feet long. And, it's fun to watch because you've got a half a dozen sharks fighting each other for the debris from the fish. But now I know what to do, but who's going in the water?
Right.
Well, lo and behold, there are people do odd jobs and everything. And one of the locals, nicknamed Fettuccine, was very quick to take up and says, "Oh, I go in all the time with the sharks." And he was this, I'd say, 6 foot, 6'2", 280 pounds of big guy. And he takes his big spear with him. And he said, "I'll go in." And he got his mask and snorkel, and he went, and he says, "Yeah, if they come by me, I give them a poke." And
yes.
So anyway,
so you basically, I'm just trying to understand it. So you basically took a garden hose and put it into your seacock and turned it on and tried to pressure some water up into your system.
One of the things I brought with me, I didn't know why I'd ever need it, but I actually brought from home an attachment onto the garden hose, or you can put on any hose that you can use in your house. And it has a rubber end on it with a small hole in the end. And when you put it into the pipe and you turn the water on, the end expands and seals the pipe. And this small little end shoots this high stream, high pressure water out of it. And for whatever reason, I brought it with me, because I said, if something with the sink or whatever, I've got something to do this, never thinking to use it in that fashion. And it worked great, because when he put it in and you turn the water on, it quickly expanded and sealed into the seacock. And as I said, it shot the water through, and it worked great. Now, a friend of ours who wasn't in a marina, he had diving tanks, and he contracted something off of one of the air tanks and shot air up through the seacock. And same thing, it worked and unclogged his system. So, so I guess the moral of this story is, one of the items is bring an extra macerator, because if it does go, you are up the creek. And fortunately, ours is working just fine right now. But we have 3 on our boat. I don't know if you have, do you have 2 in your heads? Do you have electric heads?
I do. So each head has a macerator in it. And then there's a macerator on just above the seacock that empties into the ocean.
Correct. And the 2 for the heads are different than the one for the main system.
Right. The 2 for the heads are part of the head.
Yes. And so they're different macerators. And yes, so we have the same thing. And I already replaced one of those in the head because it was acting up. That's not too bad a job. It's, not fun, but you're able to clear everything out with water before you get in there having to take it apart.
Yeah.
But it's still not fun. So that's one thing we had never considered, is the whole thing of, the black water tank and emptying it, because there's nowhere to pump out here in the Bahamas. And the sad part is, you hear in a lot of the anchorages that where there's 30 or 40 boats, people don't want to have to get up, pull their anchor, go out 5 miles, turn around and come back, that a lot of people just empty it in these harbors. And it's a big debate here in the Bahamas over doing that. But there's, as I said, there's nowhere to dump the waste. A lot of these places barely have their own septic systems.
Right.
So, and then that's also the second part, is water is a premium here. Again, they have no groundwater. They have to turn seawater into fresh water, and it's not a cheap process. So we did plan properly. We do have a water maker. I think I might have mentioned we have the Rain Man portable one. It's been phenomenal because we sit out and for a couple of hours we run this thing, and bingo, we've got 150 gallons of water.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't, and you have to depend on the water in these marinas, and it's going to be anywhere from 45 to 75 cents a gallon for the water. But you have to be careful. Is the water fresh? Is it clean? And you see this all the time with people saying, hey, don't take water from this place because it's contaminated, and we put it in our water tanks, and now we've got to empty them, clean them, and it goes on and on. So we have not taken any of our, what I'll call, drinking water on the boat from that. And as I said, we know a couple that they've had engine problems. They have a water maker, but they can't go out to make water. So they're running to the stores buying jugs of water, for drinking and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's sort of all of these technical issues that was not in sailing school.
Right.
Not in sailing school at all.
Bela, it's just amazing the adventure that Mike and his wife are on. I mean, again, I learned a lot from this episode. Some of them from his mistakes, right, and some of from the successes that he's had. I don't know, where do you want to start from a sailing perspective?
There's sort of been one common theme that I think he has said in every one of the episodes once they departed, and that is that taking sailing courses doesn't teach you everything you need to know. There's a lot more involved in sort of, particularly the type of sailing they're doing. I mean, they're living on the boat, right? They're gone for months, and not like going out sailing for 2 or 3 hours. So I think that's a real takeaway for me. Don't be overconfident. Sailing courses will tell you all the stuff you need to do about safety and how to sail the boat, but living on a boat has all these other things. Like food. How are you going to get food? That means you got to stop someplace. You got to get a car, or you got to stop someplace. There's a grocery store within walking distance. So there's a lot of those kind of logistics things involved, and planning. And if you like doing that stuff, this is great. This is a great hobby because there is a lot of planning involved. Just getting food and water and all the things that we take for granted when you're living at home, right? Just hop in the car or you walk down to the corner grocery store, you get what you need and you're done. And this is a lot different.
Yeah. Let me drill down on this water thing, because I was really surprised at this kind of getting fresh water onto the boat, getting the used water off of the boat, right? Again, you and I have talked a lot about, your experiences in the Northeast, right? And it seems like, you get outside the U.S., there's a big difference. Is this, a regional difference that just, okay, you go into the Caribbean or you go to the Bahamas and the rules are different? Or are there parts in the U.S. that have some challenges to get fresh water in and dirty water out? What's your experience?
Yeah. So I think drinking water, fresh water, is pretty easy to get almost any place in the United States. And every marina I've ever been at has a spigot that, with the garden hose, and you can fill up your boat and it's free. They don't charge you for it. I've never been in a place where they charge you for water. And I think once you get outside the United States, that's different. And you really got to think about where Mike is. He's on an island. They don't have any fresh water. There's no naturally occurring fresh water. There's no lakes and streams, and there's no wells you can drill because everything is freaking sand. They're basically on a sand dune, 75 miles off the coast of Miami. And so they have to make their own water. They have to, typically do, what is it called? Desalinization, I think is the process, or one of the processes for taking seawater, taking the salt out of it and making it into fresh water. It's an expensive process. So down there, they charge you for water, and it can be pretty expensive. Now, one of the options for boats is you can get a water maker. So they have little mini desalinization systems that you can buy. There's several $1,000s. They're not cheap. They take a fair amount of power, and you can make a goodly amount of water. Some of the boats that I've been on in the past have had those. They work great. And, if you're going to do long-term cruising where you're going to be in such places where getting fresh water may not be that easy, it's probably a very reasonable investment. So that's a challenge. Now, getting the used water off of the boat, the United States has all sorts of regulations about that. So there's two types of used water. There's what's called gray water, which is like what's in your sink and what you shower with. So it's soapy, yep, but it's gray water, and that goes overboard. Any place in the United States, any place I've been to in the United States, you can dump that stuff overboard. The other water, black water, as it's called, which is your toilets, that goes into a holding tank here in the United States. And I have a holding tank on the boat. 55 gallon holding tank, I think it is. And that not every marina, I would say 90% of the marinas you go to have pump out stations. So there's a connector on the outside of the boat. I can hook this hose up to it and turn on the pump, and it sucks all that stuff out and it dumps it into their sewer system. In some states, now this is interesting, in some states, that's free, and it's legislated to be free. So, and if you have a marina that is a certain size, you have to have a free pump out station. And that's great, right? Because it's free, and many of them are self-serve 24 hours a day. You can go there anytime and you can pump out. Other places I've been to, they regulate it as well, and I think they regulate the cost. So it's like $5, so it's pretty nominal to get pumped out. But in the United States, that's very, very common everywhere I've been, because you can't legally, you cannot dump that into the water. And sometimes a little thing that's confusing is sometimes on marine charts, which are the road maps that we use for going around on the water, it'll say on there no discharge zone. What that refers to is not your gray water, But bigger boats, like big yachts and big ships, they often have a mini sewage treatment plant on board where they treat that black water, the stuff from the toilets, and they clean it up. And it's not as clean as when it's treated, by the town, but they clean up. And when it says no discharge zone, that means big ships and big yachts can't dump that stuff overboard in those waters. So United States waters are pretty heavily protected. As we've learned from Mike, that's not true in other parts of the world. There's no regulations at all on both getting water, getting fuel, and dumping stuff overboard. And, a lot of boats here in the United States, like for example, on my boat, I do have a method for dumping it overboard. So there's a valve that I can open and turn on a pump, and it'll pump it overboard. However, per Coast Guard regulations, I have to have a lock on that valve. So if I get inspected by the Coast Guard and that lock is not on there, I get a summons. So it's pretty tightly regulated here, and I don't even know if my valve works. Right. And I think that's what Mike told us that he found out, right? He's never used it on Lake Champlain, and they tried it once, and then when they got down there to actually have to use it for real, it didn't work, and he had to get a pump, and how do you get parts? So yeah, interesting.
And again, this is, if you're going outside the US, obviously this is an important part of the planning. And if you plan on buying a boat, right, that you got to think about how you want to equip it. And as Mike talked about, these impellers and all these different parts and that you need to have, and also thinking about, do I want to get a little desalinization unit? All these things need to factor in. So I guess that kind of makes some sense when you're in the planning phase of a trip, to kind of keep all these things in mind, that, water is the most important thing that we need, right, to survive, and it can save our lives, and it can make us sick if we make a mistake, so.
That's right. Yeah. So, you don't learn about any of those things in your sailing classes.
Right. That's why it's a cool podcast, at least in my mind,
Yeah. And that's why having guests like Mike are really great, because he shares that stuff with us. So it's much appreciated. Time to wrap this one up.
Well, I'm looking forward to part 2. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds
part 2
good. Is next. That'll be episode 82. We hope you join us for that. In the meantime, thanks again for joining us for yet another episode. And we hope you found this conversation, or the first part of the conversation with Mike Malekoff, interesting and thought-provoking as we did. And as always, if you have questions about what we discussed, please feel free to get in touch with us. Best way is by email, sailingtheeast, that's all one word, @gmail.com.
Hey, and if you enjoyed the podcast, hit that follow button on your favorite podcasting application. And if you know someone, or if you would like to be on the show, hey, reach out to us, drop us an email, and let us know. So make sure you listen to part 2 of my conversation with Mike Malekoff. And so until next time, signing off from chilly Rhode Island, not upstate New York, as I usually am, but chilly Rhode Island. See you guys soon.
Sounds great, Bela. And from over here in Münster, we'll send some nice, warm, sunny weather your way. And I hope you get out on the boat this weekend. Talk to you soon, friend.